the introduction of the commissioners and staff.
Robert Wilson, Pittsburgh.
Doug Sebelius from Norton.
Kelly Johnston from Wichita.
Frank Meyer from Harrington.
Good afternoon. I'm Sherry Wilson from Kansas City.
And Gerald Lauber from Topeka.
Sheila Camus, admin support.
Keith Saxon, Assistant Secretary in Pratt.
Robin Jennison, Acting Secretary.
Dick Carruth, Topeka.
Chris Tymason, Legal Counsel.
I'd like to acknowledge the absence of Commissioner Deborah Bolton. You'll notice there's only 6 of us today. We'll do our best not to have any tie votes. I'd like to welcome to the meeting this afternoon Representative Don Schroeder from Augusta. You're welcome to participate if you wish. With that, Sheila, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Yes, there are. I sent a revised agenda. I changed presenter for general discussion item number 2, fishing regulations. That will be Kyle Austin. I added evening presentation under general discussion number 7. Jake George will be the presenter. I rearranged the general discussion items to put all of Faye McNew's items together. And in the public hearing section this evening, number 3, KAR 1157-9, the presenter is Kyle Austin instead of Doug Knight.
Thank you very much. I understand Assistant Secretary Sexton has a presentation he'd like to make.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate a little bit of time here just to give out a couple of service awards that I frankly have been hanging on to for a while, looking for the right venue to do this. The first person I'd like to call up is Sheila. I have her 20-year service award, and at 20 years you also get a service award pin. So Sheila, thank you very much. 20 good years. All right, thank you. And maybe 20 more? Yeah, okay. And the other one I have is a 10-year pin for Kevin Jones. Kevin, you come up and I'll... I suspect you got your service award sort of the paper award sort of thing at some point in time, but I was certainly... Sometimes these things get separated.
Thank you, Keith, and thank you, Kevin and Sheila. Item 4, approval of the March 10, 2011 meeting minutes. I believe there are copies on the back table. Commissioners have had a chance to review. Are there any additions or changes to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So move.
Seconded? I'll second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Very well. By the way, there is should be a clipboard or piece of paper on one of the back tables for citizens and observers to sign in. If you'd be so kind to do so, let us know where you're from. If something would develop during the meeting that might cause us to want to give you information tomorrow or later, we'll know how to reach you. So please sign in when you have a moment. We will proceed then to item 5, the section of our afternoon agenda which we devote to citizen comments, questions on matters that are not going to be on our agenda. Is there anybody who would like to address the commission this afternoon? Is there anybody who would like to address the commission? Please come up to the microphone and let us know who you are and where you're from and your concern if you have a matter. Seeing no one, we will proceed to item 6, the department report, secretary's remarks. Item 1, 2011 legislature. Mr. Tymason, Mr. Jennison, Secretary Jennison.
Mr. Chairman. I would also like to point out there actually are two legislators in the audience today. Representative Don Kirshen is in the audience. So if you'd
I'm
raise
sorry,
your
I
hand up.
overlooked it.
Thanks. That's, all right. 2011 legislative session. This is the first year of the two-year cycle. And it's been relatively quiet for the agency. And I've got a number of bills that have come up that we've talked about previously, but some bills have been signed recently, and pretty much we know where they're shaking out bill-wise now. Senate Bill 120 was the Vessel Titling Act. That bill made it out of the Senate, came into the House Transportation Committee, and has stayed in the committee since then. It would have required titling of vessels in the state. Senate Bill 123 was the department's initiative related to cabins and removing the cabins from the regulatory fee process and allowing the department and the commission to set those at a public commission meeting. That did pass out of the Senate, passed out of the House committee as well, and when it was on the House floor, there was an amendment related to land acquisition, which is also known, the original amendment would have been known as House Bill 2149. And that made it onto the bill, and then the House passed the bill and it went to conference committee. And in conference committee, there was a compromise struck, and basically it would restrict the department's ability to purchase land. Currently, we can purchase land under 640 acres without legislative approval. And if it was under the appraised value, there was no limitation on the or cap on the amount of acreage. Now it would be 320 acres without legislative approval, 640 if it's under the appraised value, and everything else would take legislative approval or the State Finance Council approval. That did go, once it goes out of a conference committee, the conference committee report has to be adopted by the House and the Senate. It has passed the House. I assume it will pass the Senate early next week, Wednesday, Thursday, probably Wednesday, and then go to the governor for signature. Senate Bill 152 was the concealed carry and the suppressors issue. That did pass both houses and was signed by the governor on the 31st of March. And that was just to make sure everybody knows, if you have a concealed carry permit, you can carry concealed while hunting. That has long been the rule of law in Kansas, except when it came to archery or a restrictive weapon season. Now people with concealed carry permits will be able to do that. In addition, we talked about suppressors last month when we authorized the use of suppressors for animal damage control. The bill also contained a provision that authorizes the use of suppressors for hunting. House Bill 2013 dealt with the sale and purchase of rifles and shotguns, and basically there was an antiquated provision of law that had never been repealed from the 70s when federal law changed in 86. Prior to 86, there was a federal requirement that you couldn't purchase a firearm unless you lived in a contiguous state, or if you were coming from a contiguous state to Kansas, that would be the only way you could purchase a firearm. Now federal law says as long as it's legal in both states, you can purchase it wherever you are. Long guns only. This is rifles and shotguns. So now Kansas law has been changed, and that was signed by the governor on the 25th of March. We've got a few others. 2089, House Bill 2089, hunting dogs would have allowed somebody to retrieve their hunting dog from posted land. That bill didn't go anywhere. It didn't even get a hearing. 2152, which was the boating under the influence bill, would have changed it from wildlife and parks violation to a criminal code violation. The bill had a hearing in the House, got onto the House floor, and was rerouted to House appropriations, so I anticipate it's dead at least for the rest of this year. 2168, House Bill 2168, would have given free park entrance to veterans. Among other things, there were 3 other items in the bill. The bill had a hearing and then didn't go anywhere, and so obviously I think that issue is dead for the rest of this year. 2295 is a deer bill, and it had a number of provisions related to hunting hunting deer. The bill was routed to a subcommittee. The subcommittee recommended to table the bill. The bill did have a hearing in the House, but I think that's in part some of the discussion that's going to occur tonight on deer proposals or deer discussion. But the bill is not going to go anywhere for the rest of this year. There's a bill that came out really late, and it really doesn't deal with us because we don't regulate feral swine, but we get a lot of questions about feral swine. And it would amend the definition of feral swine and then increase the penalty for transportation or possession or release of feral swine. Currently, it's a civil penalty. It would become a criminal misdemeanor, and it would change the definition of feral swine to include European boars. And it's an attempt, I think, by the Animal Health Department to try to tighten the restrictions on swine, people releasing swine. House Concurrent Resolution 5017, and that deals with boat tax, classification and taxation of watercraft. At one time or another in the past 5 years, either the Senate or the House has passed this provision or this concurrent resolution, but at no time have both houses passed it. The House passed it this year. It's now in Senate taxation. I don't think there's going to be any movement on it the rest of this year. But what it would do, it would place on the ballot the ability for voters to empower the legislature to change the classification of watercraft and thus the taxation level of watercraft. So first has to be passed by both houses, then passed by the voters by a majority, and then that would allow the legislature to change the taxation level for watercraft. And finally, Executive Reorganization Order 36. On executive reorganization orders, the legislature has to take action opposing an ERO that has been introduced by the governor. In our case, it would transfer the Division of Travel and Tourism to Wildlife and Parks. I think the deadline was March 28th. The legislature took no action. So on July 1st, we're going to get Travel and Tourism transferred to our department. So we will be Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism on July 1. And I'll stand for any questions you might have.
Does the commission have any questions for Mr. Thomason? Chris, I had a call from a from a citizen who was under the impression that Wildlife and Parks was now going to be issuing permits or something for silencers. That's not
the case. In relation to suppressors is the common terminology or the correct terminology. They're regulated by the federal government, and so I think it was about 4 years ago or 3 years ago, the legislature clarified a provision in law that allowed the possession of silencers by citizens. You still have to go through a federal background check, and you have to pay a tax stamp and essentially carry that with you when you have your suppressor in the field. So the federal government regulates it. We are not going to be regulating it in any way. It's merely allowing the use of those previously authorized items by citizens while they hunt.
Thank you. Are there other questions from the commission for Mr. Thomason? Questions from the public? Yes, sir, Steve.
Chris, is there a bill number to that feral hogs?
I'm sorry, I didn't say that. It's House Bill 2398, and we did put it up on the website just because we get a number of questions about that item.
The question was asked for our audience, both live and online, by Steve Sorensen. I should remind everyone that we are being streamed online and visually. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. So when you do have a question in the audience, I would really appreciate if you'd come forward and use the microphone and tell us who you are so that everybody online can also know who's speaking. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else for Mr. Thomason, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6A2, Agency and State Fiscal Status. Dick Kerr.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
First thing, the handout that you have has changed quite a bit. This is written at the end of the regular session, and things have changed dramatically since then. Right now, the House and Senate are both working on omnibus appropriation bills. We have not reconciled the appropriation bills themselves. They're in conference. So the first paragraph or so has been changed dramatically. Like I mentioned, the House and Senate are both working on a Conference Committee bill that will hopefully reconcile the FY 2011, FY 2012 budgets. As far as the department, the items that we had asked for additional funding for, the Clark State Fish and Lake Dam repair and the Pratt Office sewage line have both been agreed to in both bills, so we consider those to be approved by the legislature, and the funding will be available once the bills themselves are passed and signed by the governor. The Senate version of the 2012 appropriation bill has a voluntary contribution of $2 or more to support the annual license issued to Kansas Able Veterans National Guard members. The House and the Conference Committee on the appropriation bill concurred with that. So both houses now have agreed to have us put into our licenses a voluntary contribution of $2 or more to support the National Guard permits we issue to them. Let's change that paragraph. The next paragraph, oops, excuse me. Sorry. Next paragraph has to do with the House version of the appropriation bill. The House is taking an attitude of trying to increase ending balance beyond what the Senate has. In order to do that, the House has made numerous adjustments in the appropriation bill to increase that balance to a level they consider appropriate. And then, as you'll notice there in this next last paragraph in the bottom, they have made numerous recommendations, across the board cut, a 50% reduction in cell phone usage, etc. Now, when I get through this initial paragraph here, I'll go back to another list I did yesterday, or this morning actually. It gives you the current status where we are on these various items. So, with your permission, I'll skip that a little bit. The ending balances at the end of the regular session, the Senate had an ending balance of approximately $8 million, approximately the same as the governor had proposed. The House, like I mentioned, was trying to get a larger balance in their state general fund account. They had about $85 million. Well, since then, though, on April 15th, the Revenue Estimating Group met, which determines the amount of state general fund available for FY 2011 and 2012 to be appropriated. They lowered the amounts down by $31.7 million for both years, which affected the balance on both ones. The governor, his recommendation then, instead of being above water, was in the hole about $9 million. The Senate went into the hole also by approximately $17 million, and the House went from 85 down to about 54. So it did change how both bodies had to approach what they wanted to do as far as a Conference Committee bill or the regular appropriations. Now, since then, the Conference Committee has had 2 meetings to discuss items that were in the appropriation bills. They've agreed to the following items, at least tentatively, until they both sign off on a Conference Committee report. You can't say it's done. But the meetings they have had, they both have agreed to these items. Do not reduce the pay for appointed officials in FY 2011. This means your pay will get cut by 7.5%. They'll save you a little bit of money there. Across-the-board reduction in state general fund expenditures in 2012 by 1.193%. The Senate concurred with that recommendation of the House. And for us, it means a reduction of $721,000 in all funds in FY 2012 and about $60,000 of state general fund in FY 2012. At this time yet, we have not identified where that might be at. This just came out first part of this week, so we're still trying to figure out where it might go with that kind of reduction. But both sides, both the House and Senate, have agreed to that, so barring any other change, that most likely will occur. They both have agreed to add language to prohibit state general fund expenditures in FY 2011 for membership dues and subscriptions. They add language for the $2 contribution I mentioned earlier. They both have agreed to do that. And they both have agreed to allow the department to negotiate and enter into a contract for promotional and advertising services without competitive bidding. What that is for is strictly for tourism marketing. When we inherit, as Chris mentioned, we're going to be a new department after July 1, including tourism. Part of their program in the past has been contracting with advertising services, and they have provisos in state law allowing them to be outside competitive bidding for that purpose. Given the merger, we asked the legislature to provide the same kind of statute into our new department. It was not part of the ERO, and so they agreed to do that. So we'll have a statute that allows us to continue the practice that's been in effect for tourism prior to the merger. Issues still in conference for 2012, longevity bonus payments. The state employees at this time will still receive their longevity payments. What they have done is take the money out of our budget to pay for it, and require us to find somewhere else new money to pay for it. Now, the only difference between the House and the Senate versions, the House takes the state general fund portion of longevity bonus, requires us to find new general fund. The Senate takes both the special revenue and the general fund portion. So a little bit of difference there in that regards. The Senate has included funding continue the under-market pay adjustments. The House does not. That's about $8.5 million state general fund. It's a major issue of disagreement whether to continue that adjusting or not, given the dollar amount involved. The House will delete employee travel rewards, frequent flyer miles, and require state employees use state travel cards, not private cards, and any kind of employee awards that are out there will be swept, and the general fund savings go to the state general fund. The Senate does not do that particular proviso. The House would reduce employee cell phone contracts by 50%. Conference Committee, the Senate offered a 10% reduction rather than 50%. That's not been resolved yet. They're both, if they come back for a meeting, they may resolve that issue. But right now, the House is at 50% and the Senate's at 10%. The House has imposed a 5% surcharge on employee health insurance premiums. So our employees will pay, in addition to the health insurance premium, additional 5% on top of that for the state general fund to help get the balance up to where the House considers appropriate. Chris mentioned the feral swine eradication. In order to fund that for FY 2012, the House is moving funding from the State Water Plan Fund to a new swine eradication fund, $175,000. The Senate just takes the money from the Animal Disease Control Fund, Animal Health Department, same amount. So they both want to do $175,000 of swine control. The question is how you pay for it. So at some point they'll resolve that difference. But the intent is there still to control the feral swine situation in the state. The House deletes expenditures in 2012 for magazine subscriptions and membership dues from the State General Fund. The Senate does not. The House has a proviso that restrict funds budgeted for salaries and wages for that use only. Any unused State General Fund for salaries will be lapsed to the State General Fund. The Senate does not. What that means is that if we budget in our budget, we're budgeting a year and a half ahead of time, money for salaries and O&M. A lot of times, if we have a need either way, we move money back and forth. This is not allowed to happen. If it's budget for salaries, it's salaries only. If you have an O&M need, additional contractual services, travel or whatever, that money in salaries cannot be used for that purpose. It's strictly for salaries. The Senate does not have that proviso in their version of the appropriation bill. The House reduces the FY 2012 IT expenditures by 10%. The Senate does not. And then the House, in order to continue funding KNI, hospital in Topeka, they determined they need an amount of $270,000. In order to obtain that, there will prorate a reduction to all state agencies in the amount of bottled water and off supplies to help fund that particular amendment. So there's a variety of issues that are out there yet still to be resolved in conference committee. The Senate Ways and Means Committee met today and yesterday, and what approach they're taking as far as their negative balance, I mentioned earlier they got $17 million negative after April 15th revenue estimating. They're assuming in the conference committee there'll be $19.9 million of additional revenue or expenditure reductions, and they'll be above water by about $2.9 million. Now still, as I mentioned, the conference committee is still meeting. That will not be resolved until sometime, a week or two maybe. Neither one has agreed to meet on conference committee until next Wednesday, so we won't know until then how they will approach any more meetings. The House Committee on Appropriations and the Senate Ways and Means are both still working on an office bill. The House bill is still open for any further amendments. So it's still an evolving process, what it amounts to. We don't have anything firm to tell you in regards to where it might be, except some of the items have been agreed to on both sides, but until you have a final report and the bill is signed, you don't have anything. Things can change. For example, in the first round, the Conference Committee, the House gave the Senate some of the positions they wanted. The Senate came back and went to the House position. And there's jockeying going on occasionally, these games, I don't understand. Now, Don and these guys know more than I do. Sometimes you wonder, just, okay, what next? So it's not a very conclusive report, but it's the best I can give you right now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Kurth. Are there questions for Mr. Kurth from the commission?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Wilson?
On the voluntary contribution of $2 or more,
Right.
wasn't there a bill that would have maybe required or allowed a contribution to, is it Hunters Feeding the Hungry? I don't think I've got that name quite right.
Right.
And there was a concern about adding something like that to our license fees because we have to keep our funds separated. Is this the same kind of thing, or are we okay?
The way I understand, a little bit of difference there. Farmers Feeding Hungry was a $2 contribution to a program that we don't support. It's not part of our wildlife plan. It's one from funding that we didn't support. Now, what we're doing with the other part here is the state reimburses us for these licenses we issue. Right now, we give out a license to a National Guard member for hunting. The state general fund reimburses the cost of that license. We don't lose anything, we lose no control. All we're doing is assisting the state in trying to recognize service in our military. Okay. So there's a little bit of difference there, Sherry. It's not quite the same.
This is an opportunity to allow other people to help us fund that
Right.
program.
Allow the public
Okay.
to voluntary contribution to support this program rather than state general fund dollars if enough people would do it.
Okay, thank you.
But the $2 or more would go back to the state, not to us.
It would go to a fund designated for that purpose.
Right,
We wouldn't get
because
it, no.
If a veteran gets a free license, we get compensated from the state.
Correct.
And so any money we collect goes back to
Same
the
purpose.
source.
It would be the same thing. It would go back to reimbursing state for they're paying us the cost of our license, basically pays the state back for doing that. That's what it amounts to.
Are there other questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, will we have to maintain now 3 funds, or will tourism come under park fund?
Tourism will be a separate division by its own, has its own funding. Okay. Tourism funded out of EDIF funds, economic development money, and also other publications, special revenue type funds. Will not use our money, no. They have their own funding source, there'll be their own division. We'll track them separately in our accounting system. There will be a slight overlap. We are required to keep our indirect cost that we, for example, our accounting, our personnel and such supports the entire department. We take money out of wildlife funds, park funds, boating funds to pay for that. So, for example, Joe Kramer is running a public lands program. That support he gets from accounting, from personnel, some of his wildlife fund money goes to pay for that. Tourism will have the same thing. When they come over to our agency officially on July 1, a portion of the money that they're having, EDF money, will have to go to help support the cost of those indirect costs, paying for the accounting, paying for the HR. That keeps out a diversion. If we don't do that, we'll be in diversion. We don't like that word. It's a bad word. We don't like that word.
Are there other questions for Mr. Kurth from the commission? Questions from the public? Steve?
Steve Sorensen, Kansas Wildlife Federation from Valley Center. Dick, on the bottom page 1, it talks about the budget of salaries to be used only for salaries.
Right.
Anything left over goes state general fund.
Right.
Does that include wildlife fee fund salaries?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, right now, we've worked with legislative staff. They know our restrictions.
Okay.
And they have provided previous appropriations like this that we're exempt from the wildlife side.
Okay.
Avoiding
Well, it
future
wasn't.
problems.
It's not clear
Yeah,
there.
you're right. I mean, it's a general discussion here, Steve. I appreciate that.
Another question. The amount of funding reduced to purchase bottled water and office supplies
Right?
to fund KNI, wildlife fee funds?
No.
Okay,
Again,
so it's just reduction of,
it'd be a reduction probably in general fund. It's going to be a small amount. The total
Well,
is
yeah.
$270,000 for the entire state. Our portion won't be that much, and we'll pay out of general fund.
okay, so it's based on state general fund
Right.
proportion.
Yeah, trying to get general fund back to KNI. KNI is funded out of general fund, so they're trying to get money back to reimburse them for that cost.
Okay, you guys must drink a lot of bottled water.
No, it's statewide. Yeah, well, it's statewide.
Are there other questions from the public? Back to the commission. Does anyone have any further concerns to address to Mr. Kurth? Thank you, Dick.
Thank you.
We will move to item 6B, general discussion. Item 1, vehicles on ice. on the ice, Brad Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At the March Commission meeting, the Commission requested that the Department review the regulations regarding motorized vehicles on Department lands, in particular allowing ATVs, all-terrain vehicles on the ice. KAR 115.813 specifically states that motorized vehicles shall be operated only on Department roads and parking areas, except as otherwise established by posted notice. By definition, motorized vehicle includes all-terrain vehicles, or ATVs. Now keep in mind, there's a couple of things to keep in mind when you read this regulation, is that this regulation only pertains to Department-owned or managed lands, as defined in 115.1.1. That includes state parks, state fishing lakes, and wildlife areas. Does not include the federal reservoirs or federal managed areas. Currently, there are no designated areas that would allow a motorized vehicle or ATV on ice by posted notice. Ice fishing on state fishing lakes has been limited. There is some use, but as I mentioned, it has been limited. They're relatively small in size. Most of them have good public access around them, so if anybody wants to gain access to the ice, they can, park their vehicle and walk out on the ice and go ice fishing. With that, though, we see three possible options if the Commission wanted to pursue allowing ATVs on ice or not. One is to maintain the current regulation that prohibits ATVs on ice unless otherwise allowed. Another one would be to open all Department managed lands and waters to allow ATVs on ice by regulation, and then we would restrict certain areas through our reference document that we do on public lands. The other one would be to open up only state fishing lakes by regulation that would allow ATVs on ice, and then again restrict certain areas by the posted notice reference document. If we would pursue option 2 or 3 and regulation, there's a couple other considerations that we need to look at, and we would again consider which bodies of water would need additional restrictions. We need to think about the point of entry and exit of ATVs, such as boat ramps only, or other means where they could gain access to the ice. We need to think about what the purpose or intent of use of an ATV on ice would be. We would suggest only ice fishing only. We don't want to create a recreational area on ice for ATVs. And another consideration would be operational period, allowing them from sunrise to sunset. With that, if you have any questions or comments, I'd be glad to hear them.
Are there questions from the Commission for Mr. Simpson?
Mr. Chairman, who would be responsible for verifying the thickness of ice and the safety of individuals going out there day by day?
That would be the individual themselves.
We hope.
It'd be at their risk.
And the information I had includes aircraft?
Yes, that 115.813 is motorized vehicles and aircraft. It says authorized in operation only on Department roads and parking areas. I don't know if we have any landing strips or something like that.
Well, I was going back to the days of Vern Miller when we
I like option number 2. And as far as some of the other considerations, I think that the restricted areas should probably be those areas that have marshes and in wildlife areas where you would not necessarily be doing any ice fishing, and there are certain items there or places you wouldn't want to go. I like the point of entry being boat ramps, and the intent of use, we don't allow recreational use of boats on state fishing lakes and Department waters as it is, and I think to restrict ATVs and snowmobiles for the purpose of ice fishing would be consistent with what we currently have now. As far as some of the questions about ice safety, first of all, Kansans are doing this and using motorized vehicles like ATVs on the ice is used all over the United States in those areas where ice fishing is possible. This is not a new concept. We don't regulate how thick the ice is any more than we say you can't take a boat out when the wind exceeds so many miles per hour. We can educate and hope that good judgment is being used, but this is not a new recreational pursuit that just suddenly has popped up. This has been done for a long time. We generate a lot of ice fishing in some of our Bureau of Reclamation properties. Granted, we don't have any control over those, but I think that the Bureau of Land Reclamation is looking to us for guidance in how we handle our approach to ice fishing. We sell a lot of non-resident fishing licenses in that endeavor. There are a lot of statistics, I'm guessing, that would probably show that this is an economic development opportunity, although in pursuing the internet trying to find well footnoted statistics, I was unable to find them. I think that we should be consistent with other states that have ice fishing, and we do have an opportunity that some years is very rewarding, and I think we should try to pursue it.
Are there other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Wilson?
I'm just kind of trying to wrap my mind around this idea. I know it's done up in our northern states all the time, and as Commissioner Lauber said, it's not a new idea. But I'm just wondering if our weather is not just enough different here. I mean, up north, it's colder in the winter for a longer time. Here, it gets cold, then it gets warm, then it gets cold, then it gets warm all winter long. And just from a safety point of view, I'm wondering, what do those other states do? Are there any tools that they have to help people estimate how thick the ice is? I mean, with wind, you can kind of see that. With ice, it's not as easy, I don't think. So, do you?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer. First of all, I've been using ATVs and snowmobiles on the ice personally for an excess of 25 years, and have done so without mishap, but I'm sure mishaps can occur. The Corps of Engineers has on their website a link where you can go and they say how many inches of ice are safe per foot, how many inches are for an ATV, how many inches are for a vehicle, a car, a pickup, so on and so forth. The casual ice fisherman who is afraid of the ice thickness, first of all, is not going to take an ATV out. What we do is go to a shallow area and drill a hole and see how thick the ice is. And while sometimes ice is easy to gauge because of the clarity of the ice, sometimes it has snow cover, but you can always determine the ice thickness by drilling a hole. And I don't think that we're not going to have very many novices engaging in this sport. I think it's something that we've been allowing and weren't even really sure that it wasn't allowed until it came up this particular year. I mean, this is not a new thing. It's probably used more on federal reservoirs. But, and yes, the state lakes are smaller. They provide some access, but they still, it's easier to haul your equipment on an ATV, and it will allow us to have a little more liberalized pursuit of something that's been going on for a long time anyway.
Commissioner Lauber, could you answer a question for me? Or Mr. Simpson? This subject of operational periods didn't come up when we talked about this in general. Is there much ice fishing at night in Kansas?
From my perspective, I probably fish more as much through the ice, not necessarily, but there is some efforts to be on the ice at sunrise and sunset because there is a little more activity at that time, and the ice is no less safe. And if you're going to ice fish, you're probably not going to want to go pleasure riding in the dark. So that's the reason I intentionally didn't mention that, because it is not much after hours usage. And I mean, it wouldn't be the end of the world, but a lot of times people will try to get there as the sun comes up, particularly if there's no snow cover on the ice, just like you try to fish out of a boat.
So wouldn't it be consistent with that experience to establish a half hour before and a half hour after as the operation period?
Constituents that I know who do this would have no objection to that, because it's a rare person who would get out there before that.
Are there any other comments or questions from the commission? Comments, questions from the public? Doug.
Doug Phelps from Manhattan. Jason, I've got two questions. Is there any exception to the regulation with respect to operating a motorized vehicle or vessel on department waters? As I understand it, that they have to, be permitted and display numbers, if they're either powered mechanically or by sail. It seems to me that if you're going to take an ATV, motorized vehicle, out on the frozen public water, that it should fall under the same restrictions as anybody that takes, a motorized boat out on there. The other one asked about who'd be responsible for determining the thickness of the ice. My question is, in the event of an accident, who'd be responsible for the recovery effort? And I think we all know the answer to that, but that's all I have to say.
If you currently sink a boat, you're responsible to retrieve the boat yourself. And if you currently sink a vehicle, you're responsible now. I mean, if we're worried about safety, we spend a lot of time worrying about drownings, and if we eliminated people going out on the lake in boats, we would certainly have a lot less drownings in the state. And I guess I view this as not as big an issue as people may think it is. I think among people who ice fish, there is virtually no concern, and as far as numbers, I don't know if I have a response to that.
I don't either.
Are there other comments, questions from the public? Well, back to the commission then. I think we should move ahead with this general idea. I think the devil may be in the details. I feel, as Commissioner Lauber does, that option 2 is the best idea. And as I said at the last meeting, I think we should give consideration to imposing similar rules on ATVs on ice as we do on boats, as it relates to life preservers, or at least for minors. We should give some thought to that. Other commissioners, how do you feel?
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Wilson?
I also feel that probably this second option should be pursued. And like you said, and Commissioner Lauber said, there's probably going to need to be some restrictions at some point. But I think we should go ahead and move forward with this idea.
Any contrary viewpoint? Very well.
Okay.
Let's move ahead along those general lines then.
All right, we'll start putting something together.
Thank you very much. Item B, 6B2, fishing regulations. Kyle Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. At this time, we have no proposed changes for statewide fishing regulations for 2012, but we do have several changes on individual waters for your consideration. It is a fairly big list compared to past recent years, but I would point out that we do have 26 federal reservoirs, 40 state fishing lakes, and over 200 community lakes. So when you look at this list, only a small percent of our bodies of water are actually seeking regulation change for 2012. As you go down through that list, you'll note that there are only a couple of reservoirs looking for changes, just a handful of state fishing lakes, but the vast majority of these waters are community lakes that are enrolled in our CFAP program. Our district fisheries biologists work real close with our community lake cooperators, and I can assure you that every one of these proposed changes have been approved with 2 thumbs up from the local authorities. So I'm sure you've had time in advance to look down through this list, so instead of me going down through and reading them off word by word, unless you'd prefer me doing that, I would like that, open that up for questions at this time so I could address part 1 of this regulation changes.
Are there questions for Mr. Austin from the Commission on any of these lake regulation changes? Are there questions from the public? There should be a complete list on the back table. Hearing none.
None on there? Okay. Moving on to part 2 then on the second page, other proposed regulation changes for, it says 2011. That is a typo, Mr. Chairman, and I'll take full responsibility for that. However, in my own defense, I will add that I did send that out to the entire fisheries staff for review, and everybody must have been asleep at the wheel on that one. So we do have one new trout stocking location that we are proposing for 2012. It is out at Colby, Villa High Lake, located on the west side of town near the community college. It's about 2 acres in size. And what we are proposing is to be listed as a type 1 water, which requires a trout permit for each individual who wants to fish for and possess trout during the trout season, which runs October 15th through April 15th. And in addition, as you see down below there, we finally have taken possession of the Grand Osage Wildlife Area, which, as you know, is the Parsons Army and Ammunition Plant. I believe we have about 3,000 acres that we are in control of at this time. There's roughly 10 or 12 small ponds on that 3,000 acres that I'm aware of, and at some point in 2012, we would like to open that up to for access to the general public. But before we do that, we'd like to have some regulation in place to kind of protect the fisheries on those small bodies of water. And you can see we're looking at some length limits on bass and channel catfish, as well as pretty restrictive bass and channel catfish creel limits.
Are there questions from the Commission?
Is type 2 waters where you have to have a trout permit for all fishing? And type 1 is where you only have it if you're
fishing
for trout only?
Yeah, if you're fishing, right, that's correct.
But there are some waters that are type 2 that you have to have a trout permit to be fishing for anything.
For anything, that's correct.
That's type 2.
I don't have that list in front of me right now, but yeah.
It doesn't matter what the list, I just get the two confused.
Okay. So do I.
Other questions from the Commission? Are there questions from the public? Seeing none, sounds good, Mr. Austin.
Right, thank you.
We will proceed with item 6B3, park regulations. Linda Lanterman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Each year at this time, our agency looks at regulations that concern state parks, and this year, as I started to look through these, I had to take several things into account. And so what I'd like to do is go through each one of these and explain a little bit of the background behind them. The first of them, one is KAR 115-2-3, and this one has to do with our fees for camping utilities. What I wanted to look at there was looking at our utility fees again for possible increases. As you know, has increased everywhere. And so what I did is I went back and looked at the last time we increased utility fees was in 2009, and that was, we increased them $1. But before that, we went back to 1995 before we had any substantial increases, except it went up 50 cents in 2003. In 2006, it went up another 50 cents. So we have really kept utility fees as a steady in our state parks. However, as I started to look at the utility rates in the state parks, we have increased utility rates to the state parks up anywhere from 20 to some as high as 80%. So I think it's a valid, something valid to look at. I just wanted to make you aware of that that's something that we probably should look at as a statewide. I only pulled about 7 parks on the utility rates, but it is something that we should be looking at, especially with the current economic condition with the state park fees. I'm going to go to the next one unless you have any questions on that one. Okay. The KAR 115-2-5, this included in that is the trail pass. And we have put in a new facility in Pratt County, and it's called the Green Recreational Trail. That property was acquired 2 years ago through trail funds. And several years ago, we were in communications with Bob Green. He was originally from Pratt, lived in Wichita, Kansas, and he has 134 acres on the Nenasko River. He passed away during our communications, but his family honored his rights and wanting to let us use that property. And we lease that property currently from the Bob Green family, and it's a motorized trail. It has access to fishing on the Nenasko River. We have a pond in there also, but we also have a motorized area. And so to keep track of who comes in and out, I'd like to propose that we require a trail permit to those that come in there for that motorized section of the trail. The next one.
Excuse me.
Sure.
The way this is written up, I'm not sure I understand it. Are you proposing to charge a trail access fee for people walking and on motorized vehicles?
This is kind of in a back area, and I think we need to know who's there. So I think they need to. I look at it both ways, but I believe we need to know who's in that area. It's kind of off the beaten path, and we've put an office in there now. One of the old FEMA trailers we purchased. I believe we need to have a pass for somebody to be using that facility. It's 134 acres. It has nice trails in it. It would be consistent with the rest of the state park facilities where it require a permit to use.
My question was more directed at, are you drawing a distinction between those walking versus those on motorized vehicles charging one set but not the other?
No, I charge them all the same.
Very well. So biking...
It is a motorized trail. It is a motorized trail, but the only reason I say that, Commissioner Johnson, is because we don't discriminate now in some of our other areas.
Well, I was just concerned about how we explain that to one set and not the other. But you're not intending...
No.
This is a blanket...
That's right.
All right. Thank you. Any other comments or questions?
Well, is this something you get a Kohl's permit, or do you go to the office?
Yeah, actually, it's online. You can buy your trail permit online through our Kohl's system, through our website. You can purchase a trails permit.
So
now.
having the office there, office hours would not restrict?
It would not. We actually have a self-pay permit that you can buy daily for that also.
Okay.
Thank you.
So it shouldn't be a problem, I don't think, with making sure they have one. Okay, 115-9-8. This is camping, and this is actually the occupied every 24 hours. And this was geared more towards those that make a reservation, a campsite reservation, that we allow them to leave that. We have all their information. We allow them to forego the 24-hour occupy because they have a reservation. We would keep it intact for those that are first come, first served, because we don't, at this time, know who they are. But those that make a reservation, we do know who they are. We know who they're, what facility and what site they're at. And this would allow to take away that I have to be at my campsite within a 24-hour period of time. So those that want to take their camper out, make a reservation, El Dorado can go back in and work a couple days and then go back out. Okay, the next one is 115.810B3, and this one again has to do with pets in cabins. Again, we've tossed this in the air many times. I'd like to bring it back up one more time. Nothing like jumping in head first. And this is to allow selected cabins to have people to bring their dogs in. Certainly wouldn't want all the cabins, but for selected areas, areas that have more than one cabin, allow a selected cabin to have pets inside. There's that one. If you have any questions on any of those, then I'm going to head down to the last one here.
I have one question on the camping and utility fees.
Okay.
I concur that probably utilities go up, and I think I'm correct in that we don't have a meter on our state parks. We bid for a year's worth of all you want. Explain how we buy the power to resell to our park sites.
We have several state parks have mini meters. So El Dorado, I just talked to Seth this morning. They have mini meters on some camping loops. The utility company takes care of everything to that meter. Everything from the meter onto us, we take care of. And so each of those have a meter charge. That's part of it. And then we have a rate, and that rate most often is determined at the highest use. And so that's where our utility rates come in to be such a high. That's determined for then all year. So in July is when some of those rates are determined.
If we had a camping area that for whatever reason had a June 15th storm and rendered the campsite unusable for the remainder of the season, our utility costs would be the same.
We would still have a base utility cost, but if nobody's using that, the actual usage would not be as high.
The usage wouldn't be as high, but we pay the same.
We would pay.
Yeah, we always pay no matter how many people use it.
We pay a base fee on all of our...
So, in theory, we could make money on the power if we filled the campsites as full as possible and everybody wanted a utility.
We are still paying for some of that usage. It's not... I see what you're now trying to get at, but we still pay for a particular part of that usage. They charge us, though, based on the highest use day. So they charge those usage nights of a camper at a higher rate.
Okay, I maybe don't, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do that. It's just our utilities are different because we don't pay a set charge.
Our utilities are high.
They're high, but they're different than other types of commercial applications.
I'm going to let Alan here talk a little bit about his parks are the highest on utilities, but maybe he can get it across to you a little bit better.
I think, Commissioner, what we've got because we have so many different types of suppliers, like a Westar and other utilities, we are charged on what we use.
Yeah.
But on rural electric facilities, where we have them as a supplier, we have a demand charge. That demand charge, as Linda said, is usually based on 1 day in 1 day in June, and 1 day the first week of July, which happens to fall on the 4th of July, and it's our high use. Then we pay a percentage of that as a demand charge throughout the entire year after that. So it may not be at full price, but you're based on your peak use, which in parks in June and July is our peak use, and they're based on weekend readings, which when we're full, and basically we pay a higher percentage above that. It's not just based on use, it's a demand charge. But that's on rural electric ones, like a Westar and some of the others. We are paying for what we actually use on those. So you can have several parks, like El Dorado is a good example, where you have a rural electric that supplies half the park and Westar supplies the other half. So you have different rules in the same park. And as Linda said, we have multiple meters in each park. El Dorado has 55 meters because you're running 1,100 campsites and 29 campgrounds along with all your other facilities. And each one of those meters has a different charge depending on when it was installed.
Thank you.
Clear as mud.
Clear.
Thanks, Alan. Okay, then I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the KSA 32901, and this is the vehicle permit verbiage that we currently have to sell annual and second vehicle permits, disability permits, and senior permits. This year we had a substantial number of people. They always wait till we have different pricing. They always wait till the end of March to come in and purchase their annual vehicle permit. The wording says that you should have it should be sold to the certificate of title holder. That's for your annual vehicle. And what I'd like to do is anybody should be able to buy an annual vehicle. It's the full price. We should be able to purchase it, or I should be able to purchase one for family and friends with no certificate of title holder. However, when we have to purchase a second one or a reduced cost one or a disability permit, they should show the certificate or the registration to show that that vehicle does in fact belong to them and they're using it for themselves. That's a different story. Anytime you have a reduced type of permit, you have to have some proof that that actually is going to you and that your first vehicle received that annual permit. And then one more thing I wanted to leave you with is maybe this would be the time to actually take away the second reduced vehicle permit. It's a nice caveat when you're coming and you have many vehicles in a family. However, it is a little bit tedious to enforce, and we do have some trouble with it. And so I throw it out there just because of that. Our money's tight. It is a reduced permit. We still have our disability permits. We still have our senior permits. But the second vehicle permit would be something that we would consider doing away with.
What's a second vehicle permit cost?
It is. We have the two different prices, and so the second vehicle is right now $14.70 in the prime season and $12.20 in the off season. And so your annual, we're paying right now $24.70.
Linda, I'm confused because I just bought two of these, an annual permit and a second permit. And I had to bring the registration cards for both vehicles in with me.
That's right.
It sounds to me like you're describing a cure for a problem that doesn't exist, because I'm required to show that the same owner is titled, both vehicles were titled in already.
But if I want to purchase an annual vehicle permit and not a second, you have to bring that in. So you're still paying full price, but you have to show that proof of registration for you. So I would not be able to buy one for any of you as a gift or for your vehicle. I would have to show your registration. And what I'm saying is, when people wait till the last minute, which I understand we have that in all aspects of our permitting process, we should allow them to go in and purchase their vehicle permit for their first vehicle without showing that proof. If at the same time you're buying your second, you need both of those. You're correct.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Wilson.
So are we trying to move toward a system where where it's more like the permit goes with the person instead of their vehicle?
That permit cannot be transferable. So if you're purchasing
another vehicle,
right? That's correct. So it goes to you and your family on that vehicle.
So if I purchase one for Gerald as a gift,
it goes to his vehicle.
So does he ever have to tell you what vehicle
If he
it
comes in
is,
and
or-
purchases a second one, he does.
But not if it's just the first one?
That's correct.
Each sticker, that goes in the window has a tag number on it.
We put tag numbers on those.
But you write tag numbers on it.
We do.
But
We actually put them in the system
it's-
too.
It's difficult. I'm sure it has been done where one person buys one for two vehicles and then shares the cost with
Could be.
with his buddy. Now, I can just see where it would speed up the process on a busy weekend if we didn't have the second vehicle permit offered, and just, you didn't have to show any.
You just
any
purchase your
proof.
permits for your
If you
vehicle.
wanna pay full price and put somebody else's tag on, oh, great.
Well, we have to get your name. So
Yeah.
if Sherry's purchasing it for you, we have to have his information. And we'll put it in the
Do we
system.
sell many second permits?
You know, we sell, I don't, to be honest with you, I didn't bring that with me. Off the top of our heads.
I think it's 40,000 versus around
20, yeah, and it's under 20,000. I need to get that figure for you. And the actual cost for those. It's something to think about. We've talked about this for years, and we've never done it. I'm just game to talk about it again. It's just something. I have to look at the park fee fund balance each year, and it's something that we should always consider.
I don't think it really provides a tremendous inconvenience or a burden on anybody. If somebody's really poor, they'll just take one car to the park.
They do. You're correct. Or they buy daily. I've seen them dig out pennies for their daily. That's correct.
Are there other comments, questions for Ms. Landerman?
I do.
Commissioner Speas?
Linda, I do have, I guess, a significant question about changing it to where the fee is the same, because I've got several friends that probably buy 3 or 4 every year, and 2 of them might be for motorcycles. And I think if they didn't, obviously they would probably cut back to 1. I think it's probably one of those situations where we'll continue to generate more trade, so to speak, by having an incentive system. And I'd sure hate to have that loss under the current circumstances. And then I guess about the camping fee situation, we did raise the fees here just recently overall, not on utilities, but wouldn't the money that we raised by the last fee increase spill over and be used if, I guess, necessary to cover the utility cost?
Keep in mind that was for the annual camp is what we raised. And that was more to come more in line with those private industries that we were so-called in competition with. What I've looked at, though, is about every 3 to 4 years we look at utility fees and do an increase. Now, we did back in 2009 do one set of increases for utility rates. I guess, and we did not touch daily camp. I guess my concern, again, is this. With our current situation with the park fee fund balance, this to me is the most logical of all ideas out there, is to look at our utility fees, because we can in fact tell you what our increases are. And I would be concerned about any legislative talk to come back and say, you need to increase fees on camping or vehicle. I just feel like I can substantiate an increase in utilities because I can show you good figures on that.
Other comments, questions from the commission? Commissioner Wilson?
Is there any way for us to negotiate with the utility companies, especially if they're serving more than one of our parks or one area of our parks? I know some of them are served by rural cooperatives, so they may be small and not serving more than one, but it just seems like we're paying for a lot of utility use that neither we nor our campers are actually using because we're always being charged at the highest rate. And it seems like we should try to negotiate that.
We
we
actually
have, and it didn't work. I don't
That
know.
actually that's a good comment, and actually, Acting Secretary Jennison here has already we've discussed that, and we are looking into that. So it is good.
Linda, I have a question about the pets proposal. When people reserve cabins online, I would think that they would want to know which cabin. Are you going to designate, even on the online reservation system, which one is the pet cabin?
Oh, absolutely. Sure. If we go down that route, we certainly would do that.
Is this something you really want? I mean, do we have a huge unsatisfied demand for cabins with pets?
You know, I'm sure all the managers sitting there is like, no, we don't want that. But you know, there is a group in our public that visits that would like to bring their. You know, everybody has a hunting dog. I have 3, and none of them are hunting dogs. So you know, I just think there is you're probably talking to the wrong person on some of that because I'd bring all mine in. But I do think there's some public that do want to bring their pets in, and they are not all hunting dogs. So, you know, one way or the other, it's a good opportunity for those. We would do it not at the same fee; it'd be at an increased fee, and we would have certain cabins that would do that. Just something for you to think about.
It just seems to me that there is such a high demand for all of our cabins. I don't sense we're searching for new markets for our cabin, for people to rent our cabins, and that this is asking for a lot of maintenance issues we don't deal with now.
That's a very good comment, sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I think everybody knows my dog Sasha, and she's highly offended when we go someplace and she's not allowed to go in. So she would certainly encourage me or bite me if I didn't vote for this.
We've just christened it the Sasha regulation.
Yeah, there you go. Sasha's law. I got another.
Commissioner Sebelius?
Linda, a couple things. Well, first of all, I agree that, heartily about the pets. I think that's a good deal. The thing that I've noticed is that sometimes people chain or tie up their pet during the evening outside the cabin to the rail, and that's going to cause damage. Then they're barking, and you know, I'm sure there's lots of difficulties by not bringing them in. I think the mess would be minimal. But I did have a question about 115.8.9, the thing about, you know, if you have a reservation, then you're going to be exempt from the 24-hour rule. But don't you have the information about the people that pull in and buy?
Today.
They have to write down all of that, don't they?
Not today. Daily camping, we do not. Once we go to the reservation system, we will. But today, when you buy your daily camp, we do not have your information.
I thought it was with the you know, the self-pay.
Not you. Very good for you if you fill that completely out, but very few people do.
Well, if there's a way we can make it the same, that would be great. If we can work that out somehow.
It's just one more benefit to those that would use the reservation system.
Are there other comments, questions from the commission? Comments, questions from the public on any of these 5 or 6 proposals? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to the commission. While we've had a lot of questions, I haven't heard any consensus against going forward with any of these. We may want to see, you know, the details of the proposals, but is everybody comfortable with moving forward with all of these ideas in one sense or another? Sounds like it.
Thank you.
Very well, thank you. We'll take one more item, and then we'll have a recess for mid-afternoon. Item 6B4, falconry regulations. Mike Mitchell.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. We brought this to you last year, and we kind of tabled it at that point for some things that we had to do, some additional information we had to find out from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So we're starting back on our progress on falconry regulations. And just to bring everybody back up to date a little bit, there's obviously falconry is the sport of hunting and taking game with raptors. And it's a fairly lengthy process, fairly involved process to become a falconer. People that practice falconry have to take a test. They have to go through a program where they start out as an apprentice and can only have certain types of birds like kestrels and red-tailed hawks. They have to be mentored by a sponsor through that apprentice program. Then they can move to a general falconer and on to a master falconer after a period of years in each class. And those increasing classes of falconry permitting allow them to take increasingly larger or more difficult to handle types of birds. Right now, there's about 74 falconers that are permitted in Kansas. Falconry was first started in Kansas, first implemented in 1991. The reason that we're doing all this change is, again, because federal regulations have been changed. The federal government, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which oversees federally protected species and migratory birds, of which most hawks and falcons and these types of birds are, have decided that they no longer want to be the primary registrant or primary permitter of falconry. So essentially what they're doing is they're turning that over to the states as long as the states meet the federal requirements for falconry as put forth by the Fish and Wildlife Service. So by January 1st of 2014, all states in the nation that want to permit falconry have to meet these standards and have to have implemented state regulations that meet or exceed the federal regulations so that falconry can still continue in that state. So that's kind of where we're at in that process. There's several things that we have to deal with as far as getting our regulations approved and everything through the federal government. Obviously, just like waterfowl regulations and other regulations that we deal with, state regulations can be more restrictive, but not less restrictive than federal regulations. We also must be consistent with all the terms contained in any convention between the United States and any foreign country for the protection of raptors and under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. So some of the things that, the main things that we have to get certified with the Fish and Wildlife Service is we have to submit our falconry test and have that reviewed and approved, that everything's up to date with that. We have to provide copies of our laws and regulations governing falconry and how we certify
requirements that are met, or federal requirements that are met by the state. We also have to establish an electronic or some kind of reporting system. Some of the things that we have found with talking to the Fish and Wildlife Service, and in particular George Allen with the Fish and Wildlife Service in D.C. that oversees the falconry portion of the Migratory Bird Office. We've got draft of the regulations. We've worked with the Kansas Hawking Club. We've got comments from them. We've got comments back from George as far as everything that we need to have. But one of the things on this electronic or this reporting methodology, anytime that you have you do anything with one of these falconry birds, you have to report it on a form that's called a 3186A. One of the things we found is that the Fish and Wildlife Service will only allow 2 people in the department access to that database, and so we have chosen, because of that, to have all of our falconers be able to do electronic entry of the 3186A report forms rather than us provide a paper form and have to enter it for all the falconers. And at times there can be, what I would say is a significant number of these 3186A forms. Anytime a bird's trapped, anytime a bird's turned loose, anytime a bird is transferred from one person to another, bird dies, a bird escapes, all these kinds of things have to be reported by a separate 3186A form each time something that occurs. So that's the reason that we're going down that road. So we've got to that point so far. The recommendations that we've worked on with the Kansas Hawking Club is that primarily, we're going to follow the federal regulations. The things that we're looking at to be more restrictive in our regulations, again, are basically the same as they were previously. That we're going to allow lapsed permits to be reinstated at previously existing level without requirement to retake examinations, and that's in accordance with federal regulations for not having lapsed for more than 5 years. This will take into account reasonable circumstances that may occur with individuals that may not be able to renew a permit to keep birds, such as maybe they're on military deployment or something. One of the things that we all thought should be more restrictive on apprentice falconers, since they're just getting into the sport, that they should only be able to possess wild-caught kestrels, red-tailed hawks, and red-shouldered hawks. Right now we have higher ages for youth to get into this sport, and we're looking at adopting the lowered minimum ages as per federal regulations. These would also require signature by an adult, by their parent, to or their whoever's looking after the kids or whatever, to be able to do this, because it is quite a investment in time, and not everybody's going to do that, but we certainly want to have the opportunity for kids to be able to participate. Also, we're looking at the indoor and outdoor falconry holding facilities for the birds that falconers keep to be constructed and inspected prior to the issuance of the falconry permit. Falconry equipment, the hoods, the jesses, this type of equipment should be possessed by each falconer or applicant falconer before the issuance or renewal of their falconry permit. We want to adopt federal regulations on types of raptors and when they can be taken, but require a valid Kansas hunting license. That would be more restrictive than the federal regs to take raptors from the wild. We also, no species listed as threatened or endangered in Kansas can be taken. Each item of equipment used to capture raptors, the types of traps that they use, we say shall be tagged with permittee's name and falconry permit number. Raptors taken under a depredation or special purpose federal permit may be used by general and master falconers. Raptors of this type are typically golden eagles. There's times when some of the western states, Wyoming, for example, may have golden eagle depredation permits open where it allows falconers to go out and capture some of these birds that are depredating on livestock. There's also instances where they can be transferred back and forth between different falconers and such things like that, and those would be the special purpose type permits. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Does the commission have questions for Mr. Michener?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. You mentioned that to get from an apprentice falconer level to the general class and then general class to master falconer, you have to have a certain number of years. Is there a certain number of hours that they have to be, especially for the apprentices, that they have to be actively participating in the sport with their mentor? Or no matter how many times they go out during, say, 3-year time, they can, and work with the birds, they can just automatically move up after that time's over?
It's a time period. It's a 2-year time period for apprentices. They have a sponsor. The sponsor works with them. I mean, this is something. This isn't hours. This is almost full time. Okay. That they're having to work with these birds. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lifestyle that even more so than bird dog training or something like that. Okay. So when they're apprentices, they're working with their sponsor who is teaching them how to take care of birds, what they need to do to feed them correctly, what they need to do to trap birds. They go out, they'll capture birds, all that kind of stuff. And then, I believe it's after 2 years, I know it's after 2 years on apprentice, then they can move to general, and I believe they have to be a general falconer for 5 years before they can move to a master falconer class.
Do the apprentice falconers, do they possess a bird? They have a bird at their home, and they are taking care of it so they're learning how to do that as they go. Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the commission for Mr. Michener? Questions from the public? Hearing none, if there are no further questions from the commission, it sounds like we're ready to move forward with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. At this point, we will take a 15-minute recess. Let's reconvene at 3:15. Thank you very much.